Welcome to The Next Journey, the adventure travel podcast with me, Andrew St. Pierre White. I'm a prisoner of this hill. And I have in the studio with me, yours truly, Popsy, Gwynn.
The perfection.
The perfection. Okay, so...
all I need is the cat, and then it'll be the ultimate imperfection.
Right. We're going to discuss something that Gwynn has been working now for about 4 months, and it is the creation of a course for the Overland Workshop called, and I'll hand it over to you, it is called the
365-day Nomad Off-Grid Pantry.
Right, so we've been working on it. We've been working on it together. We're quite proud of it, and it covers our experiences of traveling and our relationship with food, because we've been doing expeditions together for 30 plus years, over 30 years, about 35 years now. It's about 35 years now.
That makes me feel so old.
So can you remember the very first trip? I remember when we were doing the first trip we ever filmed together. We were cooking at Nata is what I was thinking.
Was it Nata or Kutsi?
No, it was not. Oh, was it?
Because we in the beginning, when you and I first started our life journey together, we were living in Johannesburg, and we loathed it. And we would say, oh, let's go away for the weekend. Where should we go? Let's go to Botswana. Cool, let's go. Now, let's get real here. From Johannesburg, where we lived, to the start of the wilderness in Botswana, which was Nata, which was like the gateway to everything, was like a 12-hour drive. Am I correct, Andrew? Is my memory serving me?
It was a little more than 12 hours.
So it was about a 12-hour drive, or maybe a little bit more. We would think nothing of saying, let's go away for the weekend. Let's go to Nata. We would on the Friday. We'd take the Friday off. We'd get in the car at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we would drive and arrive at Nata at night. We'd have the Friday night and the Saturday night in the bush. We'd get up at 4 o'clock on Sunday morning, and we would drive back to Joburg to be at work on Monday morning. I kid you not. And as a result, there was no time to faff around with cooking and things, stopping to eat along the way. I mean, that just, it couldn't fit into that kind of travel that we did. And we did that for years. So I remember I used to cook sausages. I'd make, in South Africa we call it padkos, Padkos, road food.
Road food.
Yeah. And I would cook up pork sausages because we both like, grease wrapped in innards, whatever. And I would cut them up and put them in rolls with mayonnaise. And I don't even think we stretched to tomato because you don't like tomato.
No, the thing is that you would do that for our trip out, so we had fresh food. And of course we didn't have a fridge, so it was okay for the first day, maybe 2 days, not more. And so we would have lettuce and tomato and mayonnaise and sausages. Sausages. Was our
and
big
I'd
thing.
wrap them in tin foil and put them in a Tupperware at my feet. And, to keep our flagging, we're doing all this driving to get to this place to escape Johannesburg. And we would eat these rolls with sausages.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got onto that.
Well, I was actually thinking about we did actually film that. We started at that time. That was 1990, and we started doing my filming thing, and we made home movies. We just did home movies. And there's a shot of you cooking on the Skottelbraai, which was a ploughshare type thing that we would traditionally cook bacon and eggs, mostly bacon and eggs, and occasionally a steak or something on it. But if we had a steak, we would generally put that on the open fire. So it was mainly bacon and eggs that we used as Skottelbraais. And there's this shot of you making bacon and eggs at Nata Lodge, and that was in my mind's eye of what was happening to us with our food. But the thing is that we never had a fridge.
No, we didn't. And that made, the fact that we didn't have a fridge, it made prepping food so much more challenging. I remember a trip that we did, it must have been in the late 80s, I think, where we went with my brother Lou and my ex-sister-in-law, who became a friend of mine after she and my other brother split up, and you and I, and we went and we did this mammoth trip. We went from Johannesburg, where we were all living, we went around the western side of the Okavango up to the Panhandle,
Shakawi,
where you got
Dara,
so sick because you drank poisoned water.
This is Andara behind me, Andara Mission Hospital, which I've had to visit because of an extreme case of the jippos. And the kind German doctor, obviously from Southwest, gave me some this and that and some dehydration tablets, whatever, with a total cost of 6 rand, which I think is not bad going.
And then we went across to Katimo.
We are now at a camping site at Katimo Mililo, and in the background we have the Zambezi River. As you can see, it's very, very pretty. And tonight we're going to go and eat hotel food for Andrew's stomach.
The water tastes great.
Does it? The shower's going to go down well. It's good to be back in friendly territory. We're going to need gas, eh? Because this gas is huge.
And then down the eastern side of the Okavango, it was an epic trip. And I remember we carried a cabbage with us.
Yes,
because this was going to be our fresh food. We would carry things like cabbage and butternut and gem squash and potatoes, things like that, because we didn't have a fridge. There was no way you were taking tomatoes or lettuce. So it was very much root vegetables. You could take carrots, they would survive out the fridge. But on this trip, we took this cabbage and it didn't get eaten, and it just got more and more and more and more shriveled as we went along.
Right, this is a cabbage. It was bought in Johannesburg about 3 weeks ago. It was travelled through Gaborone, through Francistown, through Maun, along to Lake Ngami, through Shakawi, through the Caprivi Strip, back into Botswana, and ended up at Sarendela in the Chobe finally 3 weeks later, after having done a detour through Zimbabwe. We've now decided to eat this poor animal, vegetable, mineral, whatever, and we do it with much regret because it's probably one of the most well-travelled cabbages in Africa. So we'll put it in the poiki tonight and see if there's any sustenance left in it. We did try to organise visas for it, but we thought we might be antagonising the local border guards if we did ask them to stamp it, so it remains unstamped.
And in the end, we were joking, we need passport stamps for this cabbage.
Yeah.
And it made the whole trip back. And look, if we'd got into trouble, which we did a few times, we had some adventures on that trip. We did a section of road where I think we travelled something like 5 miles in 8 hours or something, and we were trailblazing. There'd been so much rain, and eventually we had to just sleep out in the bush, and the elephants were pushing down the trees, and we got out of the tents in the middle of the night and huddled in the car. And we were in the Range Rover, and there was this terrible thing, is the Range Rover going to start if an elephant attacks, kind of thing.
Yeah, we used to clap when it
started. Yay!
Right, what you see behind us here is a campsite where we spent a few worrying moments last night. We heard of elephants foraging behind us. The reason why we're here is that we spent 8 hours to do 100 miles yesterday through much swampland and much detouring around full pans in the middle of the road. And we were heading for Savuti, but seeing the condition of the road is so bad, we decided to camp over last night and turn around and head back to Sarendela. Now the problem is to find the way back to Sarendela. So when we get there, we'll tell you what happens.
Hey, baby. First difficult part is over.
But if we'd really gotten into trouble, we could have eaten that cabbage. Wouldn't have had much nutrition in it, but we could have.
We were going to eat it. We had intended to eat it. It wasn't
but it
taken
became
as
a travel companion after a while.
The next day it probably would have got a name, but it didn't actually. I think we binned it before we crossed the border. So how did we cope with eating nice food? You will remember this. You'll remember this better than me because you used to do most of the food preparation, obviously. How did we store? How did we carry? Because I remember we ate well. We
did
ate well. What was your secret?
Well, we'd have those. We'd have a cooler box, a coolie, they call it in some parts of the world, or an esky here in Australia, but it's just a cooler box. And one of the things, you used to get those blue bricks that you would freeze.
Yes.
And then wrap them in newspaper.
That's right.
By wrapping them in newspaper,
yes.
it kept them colder for longer. So
yes, the other that's right. And I remember now, we would take gaffer tape.
And
duct tape. We had gaffer, and actually tape the lid of the cooler box to stop any air
coming
ingress
in
at all. And we would have cool food for about 4 days. I seem to remember.
And then after that, it was tins, or if one came to a trading store where you could buy meat. But otherwise, we'd eat tin food, and you'd make a stew of it, and you would try and make it as interesting as possible. You'd put potatoes in it, you'd take the basic tin food, the tin of whatever, tin meat, and you'd make a lovely stew of it with potatoes, the carrots, the butternut, those onions, great, because they travelled well. And you'd just make what in South Africa is called a potjie, those three-legged pots, and you would cook meat. That was it's called a potjie, and it's a whole process of cooking with raw meat. But we'd make a potjie with
tinned meat.
And you can make tinned meat very interesting. Chuck in a dollop of red wine in it, and you've suddenly elevated it.
And the onions would stay fresh for.
And the potatoes
virtually the entire trip. It would start changing colour a bit towards the end of the trip because
they might start sprouting.
Yeah, and they were it was very dusty and very bumpy, so they didn't look good at the end.
And then we got a fridge. Do you remember our first fridge? That dreadful. We thought it was fantastic, but it never actually worked.
No, it was
Paraffin, or what was it?
Edessa. I think the name of it was Edessa. They went bankrupt. I fought with it for. We probably had it for. I'm guessing 6 years. Might have been more. Might have been less. But I remember fighting with it the whole time, and it kind of worked, and then it didn't work at all. It had a 7 amp small heating element to heat up the tube. You could run it on gas, but I was not interested in running it on gas while driving. To me, it was just too dangerous to do that. So you would run it on the electricity, but it used to use a lot of current, so it wasn't very efficient. And so
you were always tweaking with the pin or something. Constantly tweaking with the pin, I seem to recall.
Yes, because the gas jet would block, and as the gas jet starts to fill, it's the efficiency. So I would look down the tube, and I would have to service the fridge every couple of days. I'd look down the tube and make sure it was kind of equally warm all the way up, and I'd look down and see if the thing was round, and fiddle, and there it was. But the food wasn't cold. all this effort.
And
the food wasn't cold. It was. The beers were just a little bit better than they would if they'd been sitting in a box, and that was the best we did. Eventually, I actually went back to Odessa and said, "It doesn't work. Can you service it?" And they came back and said, "Yes, here's your bill for servicing it. We've got this, we've done that, and we've changed the jets." "Oh, you changed the jets?" "Yes, they were the wrong ones put in as when it was manufactured." And I said, "And you've charged me for it. And you built the fridge, and you put in the wrong jets, and you're charging me for this." Yeah, tough. They didn't last very long, So it was a terrible product made by a terrible company.
We thought we were kings because we had a fridge in the back of the car.
I don't know. I never felt that way. It was just a constant annoyance, and sometimes I actually wish we didn't even have it because it took up a lot of space. But then we got an Engel.
Yes.
We were sponsored an Engel. There was a company in a long time ago. The first proper, efficient 12-volt compressor fridge that came to South Africa was made by Engel.
And that revolutionized camping for everybody.
Changed everything.
For everybody.
It
changed cooking, it changed how far you could go, where you could go. It just revolutionized it.
It is, and in fact it was as pivotal in the four-wheel drive camping community as are lithium batteries in the fundamentally changing the way we live in the bush. And then suddenly we had a cold.
You could have ice.
You could actually. We never had ice, but
you could have ice 10 days into your trip.
Well, you would have cold beers, and your meat would be fresh. You could have fresh meat. You could have fresh
vegetables and things.
And you could have a lettuce that didn't look like somebody's washcloth that had been fallen out of the back of their bucky.
But the fridges also brought another challenge, because with the fridge, it's now, the old saying, everything but the kitchen sink. Suddenly, whereas we used to in the old days, we used to be able to put all of our food in a box, the black box.
Yes.
We travel a lot lighter.
You know what my daughters would say to this now? They say to us, "That's a wonderful story, Grandpa." So, carry on.
But we travelled a lot lighter with food. We were much more fruit. We ate well, but we ate a lot more simply. And food prep as a result was a lot easier. We weren't trying to run a Gordon Ramsay kitchen in the bush as people can do now.
Some people like that.
I
Some
know.
people. I mean, Andronette and Sean.
I was just going to mention Andronette and Sean. That's why they go.
I think that is why they go.
To go and make this amazing food in the desert. For me, that's not what it's about.
So those of you who have watched the channel know Andronette. His channel is called Expedition Extreme. They live in Dubai, and we've been to see. We think we've been on about 4 trips with them.
Great people to travel with.
The wonderful company.
And you eat like royalty.
Welcome to my adventure in the United Arab Emirates. 6 days we've been on the road, and this is our final campsite on the beach in a place called Silla. You eat so well.
But the effort that goes into producing that food, it's hours of time, to purchase, prep the menus, purchase the food, pack it in the vehicle, take it out, cook it, wash up afterwards. It's like, that's not why I go into the bush. That is absolutely not why I go into the bush. I go into the bush to be in the bush. And I'd much rather be sitting there watching a magnificent sunset and talking and being with the people that I love than slaving over it.
Because it's one of the things I've noticed. I mean, with Sean and Andronette, they live for that. They love that. And Sean's thing about cooking, he'll do a roll of pork or something on the open fire and everything. It's his thing. He loves doing it.
Yeah, and there are people who love that. And those people probably won't want to do my course. Because
I disagree with you.
My course is for people who, you see, the way I look at life, there are 2 kinds of people.
Okay.
There are people who love cooking, and then there are people like me who just want to get a meal on the table, a good, healthy, nutritious, delicious meal on the table as quickly as possible so that they can get on with their lives.
Would you mind if I interrupt you just a
Yes.
little bit? You do actually love cooking. It's when you have to do it day after day after day, and when we had kids living at home, and you had to do a meal every single day, and I can see you now
wake up
rolling
in the
your
morning
eyes.
and the first thing you ask yourself is, what am I doing for supper tonight?
That has got to kill the passion for cooking. But the fact is that you do still occasionally enjoy your cooking. It's not something that you hate doing.
No, it's not.
But it's become very efficient.
Yes, I'm willing to take 2 days and get into the kitchen and prep a whole lot of food that I either freeze or dehydrate or can or preserve in some way, so that I can come back later and have a meal on the table within 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's how I like to cook.
And it works incredibly efficiently, see, because I noticed with some camp setups with friends, you have a separation. Often the women, not always, are doing the cooking, and the men are doing the fire and having a beers and chatting. And there's this kind of separation. And some people are happy with that. But I look at that and think to myself, what is causing the separation? Is it food? Because if it's food, then surely the challenging, difficult stuff that can be done at home actually should be done at home. Because you can do it over a couple of weeks before the trip. And then when you get in the car, you've got all the stuff in the car. The separation times become reduced, because those preparing the meals, it's now 20 minutes, not an hour and a half.
And you could still put your meat on the barbie, on the fire, and still have that wonderful camp feel.
Yes.
But without that, the grind.
Yeah.
And all the washing up that goes with it, and particularly if you're conserving water.
Yes. The washing up becomes a problem because it is so water intensive. So tell me a little bit more about the course that you've put together, or we've put together, but you're presenting it.
Yes.
And to give us one or two nuggets of.
I teach how to arrive at your campsite and have a meal in 20 minutes, in a nutshell.
And I have to say, it's a really good meal.
Okay, it's a really good meal. I teach how to dehydrate foods so that they're light and easy to store and don't take up space in your refrigerator.
Example?
Tomatoes. Tomatoes are buggers to travel with.
Yes, I know. They're terrible.
They always have to be on the top of the fridge.
Yeah.
But the lettuce also always wants to be on the top of the fridge. You've got all these things that want to be at the top of the fridge, and you're wanting the cheese that's at the bottom. So you're there digging and ferreting, and things are flying in every direction. Well, with me, I don't know. Maybe other people are more glamorous and elegant and have got this sorted out. But, and you're trying to put things, take those things that need to be at the top of the fridge. Okay, you can't dehydrate lettuce, unfortunately. But things like tomato or your marrows, zucchinis, mushrooms, all those things that need to be in the fridge, that just take up a lot of space, dehydrate them. Put them in a packet and drop them in a drawer. What a pleasure. You've now freed up all that space in the fridge for the other things you need for your Gordon Ramsay kitchen in the bush.
So let's take that example then of tomatoes. Take that example, and you're now at your camp. You've now got the equivalent of how many tomatoes in the jar. What is the process of reconstituting them so they're delicious tomatoes?
Where I dehydrate tomatoes, I slice them up. I put some herbs on them, some mixed herbs. I'll put some nutritional yeast on them, gives them a lovely cheesy flavor. Put them in the dehydrator. Once they dry, I've got a choice now. I can powder half of them and use that for tomato paste. Sprinkle the powder on a baked potato, a potato that you've done in the coals perhaps, or over a mashed potato, or you can put it on a sandwich. You can sprinkle that tomato powder. Gives you that magnificent burst of tomato flavor. Really, really lovely. Or you can take the dried tomato and you can put that in a casserole. It rehydrates in the liquid that you're cooking with. A thin little, round of tomato rehydrates in no time. So instead of now having to carry tins of tomato for your casserole, you've got dehydrated tomatoes that are already flavored, got a delicious flavor. Chuck them in your casserole. So with the combination of your powder and your dehydrated tomatoes as whole tomatoes, you've solved the entire tomato conundrum. You never have to carry a fresh tomato with you again. Yes, you don't have the lovely visual for Instagram where you're cutting up a beautiful fresh tomato, but really it's a bit squished because it was in the fridge.
And it had managed to find its way underneath the cheese on a rough
road.
So
that's just one example.
Yeah,
so that's on the dehydrating side.
Right.
I like meals in a jar. I like to have, when I'm camping or even at home, where I've had a really rushed day and I want something, that 20-minute cook, I like to be able to take a jar of home canned food. So I teach canning, pressure canning on the course, of how to preserve meat, particularly, and vegetables in a jar, home cooked, that you can open at a campsite, pour into a saucepan, thicken a little bit to make a nice gravy, and pour over rice, a stroganoff, a stew, chicken pieces that you can add into any sauce you fancy. Fancy a green curry? You can make yourself a green curry with chicken out of your can, out of your home canned meat. And those are fabulous because that is just it's an instant meal and it's home cooked. You know exactly what's gone into it and it will preserve, it'll be on your shelf for 5 years, no problem. And it's ready to go when you need that meal.
So in terms of the canning, give us some ideas of a very quick rundown of the process of canning. Is it going to take so long to do the preparation that somebody might say, well, that's so long at home, I'm spending hours and hours and hours. Is it really worth it? Is this a very typical canning process?
Yes, canning is a long process. Anybody who tells you canning isn't a long process has never canned anything. But the beauty of it is you say, right, I'm going to be canning today. To can a little pint jar, by the time you've cut everything up and done, the actual processing time in the pressure canner is 1 hour and 15 minutes. And during that time, you need to hover. Okay, so it is a lengthy process. But think about this. A normal pressure canner for home canning, you can put 18 jars in there. So you've taken a morning and you've made at least a dozen
meals.
Where else are you going to be able to invest that time? And they'll stay on your shelf for years. So not only are you creating food for your travels, but you've got food at home for an off-grid situation. We all saw what happened with COVID. I've got to tell you my COVID experience.
Are you sure you want to?
I had been stocking, Andrew and I have stored food for decades. But with COVID, I thought, well...
No, it's not a lot of food. It's just that we always like to have a couple of months backup. It's a comfort thing, I think, more than anything else in the house. And we do that. And then when COVID came along, we went...
Let's just stock up a little bit more.
Well, that's good. We've got that. Let's boost it a bit.
Yeah. So I toddled off down to our local Woolies. And my first sign that things were a bit different was there were no trolleys. and there was nowhere to park. Well, before I noticed it, there was nowhere to park my car in the car park. And I thought, that's strange. So I kind of parked off on a side road, and I walked down, and there were no trolleys. And I thought, I walked into the store. It was pandemonium. There were people fighting, literally fighting over the last pack of chicken. I got in my car, I drove home, I grabbed my girls and said, you have to come and see this. You will hopefully never see this again in your life, but you have to experience this. I took them down back to the shop, all thought of shopping, forget it. We just walked around watching these loonies.
These are people that were scared.
They were scared, and they had no preps, nothing prepared.
Yeah.
And we were following a worker, and he had a pallet. He was taking pallets, I think, yogurt or something. People were snatching the yogurt off the pallet as he's walking along, and he's singing at the top of the lungs, "It's the end of the world as we know it." So yeah, investing a couple of hours to make yourself some canned food, home canned food that you have chosen the ingredients, you've chosen, out of prepared, tested recipes that you know are healthy and safe and not going to kill you. And having that food in your cupboard, that's a nice feeling.
Yeah, it is. So that's also actually part of the course. Is that you talk about a little bit about preparing food for long-term storage, and we should perhaps do a podcast on our own food storage. It's not mammoth. It's not doomsday. It served us well during COVID because you could walk out of the store and say, okay, well, I'm okay. I'm going to wait for this to die down, which it did reasonably quickly. And then there were a few things you couldn't get, and we went and stocked up on those few things that we were a little bit short of, but we didn't need to. It was actually a very comforting feeling. I wonder how many people have actually, because of the COVID experience, have actually changed their mindset when it comes to...
Oh,
do you think it's...
Mega.
Do you think so?
Mega.
Okay.
I'm in the process of starting a sideline business. It's part of 4 Weeks Overland, and it's part of what we do, but it is helping people to store a year's supply of food. Now, maybe I'm letting the cat out the bag here about our own food storage. It's maybe a little more extensive than Andrew has let on, but I have seen the upswell on social media of people looking for information of how do I get food self-sufficient. People are very aware. People are aware.
Which I think is a very healthy attitude, actually.
Because then if you are prepared, you're not a drain on society. I could leave Woolworths without buying a single thing and leaving that food for people who needed it. I wasn't part of the problem.
Yes.
I didn't become part of the problem.
Sure. See, that is why we put solar system on our house. We've got a good, healthy solar system on the house. We could survive without external energy. We don't. We do use gas, and we do use a bit of electricity in winter. But we could survive completely off-grid should we need to. I don't think it's ever going to come to that, but should we need to, it's a comforting feeling. Having a food supply and having a backup.
And knowing how to store food so that you know that it's safe to eat long term.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be getting sick while you're on the trail or in a crisis situation.
Yeah. So again, give me the title name of the course.
It is the 365-day...
Which is 1 year.
1 year.
Yeah.
Off-grid.
Right. Disconnected from society in general.
Nomad for us
so in other
overlanders.
Words, moving around. Right.
Pantry.
And that is now available on the Overland Workshop. That's overland-workshop.com. And there are actually now currently 9 courses. And you can purchase the new course or alternatively subscribe. A yearly subscription gets you all of the courses that are currently running on it, and of course any course that we add to the library of courses on Overland Workshop during the next year, during the year of your subscription.
Yeah.
And I think that's I'm pretty proud of Overland Workshop actually, because and I did it, and Paul and I really we made the Overland Workshop because we were both being bombarded by questions, by four-wheel drive questions, and it's not unreasonable. You get onto YouTube and you have an audience, and the audience respects your opinion, and it's not unreasonable for them to say, oh, I'd love to ask Andrew a question about my Hilux or about my suspension on my Nissan. It's impossible for me to answer those questions. So the Overland Workshop was a case of saying, how can we teach the principles? So it might not be vehicle specific. Actually, it's not vehicle specific at all. It's principle specific. And what you've done now is you've said all of these people that are going to, your new channel and set of courses that you're going to create, it'll be on a separate, we'll be launching it.
I'm hoping for January, that's my plan.
Right. So you will be in the same situation. You'll have so many people asking you questions, and it is impossible and unrealistic to answer all of them.
All you can do is teach people principles.
You can teach people principles because the way people eat, everybody eats differently.
Yes.
So you're teaching principles. So, I don't like tomatoes. Well, here's an alternative. Here, So again, it's principle based.
Yep.
Like the Overland Workshop is for overlanders. It's principle based, and you're basically doing an Overland Workshop for
people who want to store food.
People that want to store, prepare, and travel with food. There's so much I have learnt while doing this course with you. I mean, I've been watching you do it.
He's done quite a bit of the filming because
I've done quite a bit of the filming, and it's so interesting. It is, and there are some rules. My thing is, okay, well, how do I know if it's you've stored it yourself? We take a can off the shelf in a supermarket. We assume, and we open it and eat it. We don't even think.
Yep.
When we do it at home, we're using almost identical process, but we're doing it at home, and because we're doing it at home,
they're risks.
There are questions.
There are questions that come in. But home canning has been around for generations. And after the war, there were quite a few people in the States who were home canning and they got sick. They suffered from botulism. So the USDA in America started a series of test kitchens. They weren't trying to stop people home canning. They wanted people to home can more safely. So they created test kitchens where they would go in and they would find the perfect way to can food safely. And they put out approved recipes.
Right.
So if you are using an approved recipe done according to the guidelines stipulated for that tested recipe, and you not being a cowboy and deviating and winging it, you will get safe to eat food. And any fears that you have about handling a pressure cooker, some people are terrified of pressure cookers because we all know the stories of blowing up the house with a pressure cooker. We all grew up with that. Well, I certainly did. But it's a skill. You learn how to use a pressure cooker, just like you learn how to use a chopping knife. It's no different. These are learned skills. And anybody with a modicum of intelligence can learn how to do them. And if you follow the tested recipe, you can take that jar off the shelf. And as long as the integrity of the lid is there, that the seal hasn't broken, that food is safe to eat.
And there's a test. You demonstrate the test to see if the seal has.
And if you are still in doubt, all you have to do is boil that food for 10 minutes, and then you're 100%.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other part that you're adding to it's not going to be on the Overland Workshop course that you've created, is freeze drying. Is another thing that you are now working with.
I'm working with a friend who is a freeze drying master. She and her husband own 3 freeze dryers, and they freeze dry meals. This is domestic. They're not used. This is not commercial. This is for their own home storage.
Because I have on occasion been given freeze-dried food from, you buy them at the camping store, and occasionally they're expensive, and because it's quite intensive to actually do this, but you do it at home, it's actually not that expensive. And
the freeze dryer is expensive. It's a hell of an investment.
Okay, the machine is
expensive.
Yes.
And it's a long. You think canning is a long process. Freeze drying is an even longer process.
Right.
But you end up with food storable for up to 25 to 30 years, which is, and it's so simple. You arrive at your campsite to reconstitute, you just add water, you've got a meal.
Well, what I was actually going to say is that I'm sponsored this stuff. I get sent it every now and again. Somebody will say, here's one, try this, try that. I've never had a bad one. I've never taken a freeze-dried meal out of a tin and rattled it around out of one of that plastic packaging that it comes into, and it's always good. Sometimes it's fantastic. It's really good. It loses no flavor at all, and it's instant. I'm generally very impressed with the off-the-shelf freeze-dried meals that you could get at your camping store. So I'm very excited to actually watch my favorite meals that you make freeze-dried, and we take it on a trip. So that's coming.
So the things that I cover in the course are canning, how to can safely, making those meals in a jar, dehydrating, making sure that you've got light, easy to transport, delicious food to be used in your cooking. I cover cooking with a Wonder Bag, which is energy efficient cooking. I cover the advantages of a deep spice bag. You cannot overemphasize the importance of having herbs and spices to dress up your food. And then we cover something on water. That's what we're covering in that course.
And not water, energy.
Energy.
It's about energy, yes. Thank you, Gwynny, for your participation. Thank you for all those major podcast platforms, and of course for your YouTubers watching the show. Thank you for watching. Remember, like and subscribe, and more important than anything else, share this with your friends if you've enjoyed the show. See you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the Next Adventure podcast with me, Andrew St. Pierre White. To find out more information, check out TheNextJourney.net. Join us each Sunday